Welcome back to Flop Warning, everybody. Thanks so much for being here on a Men's Monday edition of the show. Riley Woodall alongside Hayden Smith and Elias Corey. Josh Bodie, our producer. We also have a very special guest joining us later in the program. But with that in mind, with a couple weeks left in February, tensions are building, fan bases are getting nervous, and every single win matters. So with that in mind, let's go to the monitor and look back at the best games of the past week of basketball. Hayden, I'm going to you first. Who do you got? Previous game of the week that was on fire.
Well, I don't know if this game was essentially on fire, but I was looking at it the entire weekend. I mean, it was UConn against Marquette at UConn. I mean, they just absolutely ran Marquette out of the building, won that game 81-53. I think after that, the Huskies are, in my mind, the clear-cut top team in the nation at this point in time, especially after Purdue lost one at Ohio State. We'll talk about that here in a little bit of time. But, I mean, that 24-8 run to end the half, again, it just completely shut the door on Marquette. I was blown away that there was just no fighting them after halftime. I mean, second half, it was just all UConn. I mean, you had those top 7 players for the Huskies are just absolutely lethal. I mean, you got Tristan Newton, Alex Caravan, Cam Spencer, Donovan Clingan, of course, had a phenomenal game, 17 points. They had 4 players in double figures. This team's for real, and they could potentially be another team that goes back-to-back for the first time in quite some time.
I think something, too, to point out, 11 threes from UConn. That's just in one game is ridiculous. They were 12 of 14 free throw line, dominated on the rebounding side of things, 45-27, 18-10 offensively. Those extra possessions that you get, or those longer possessions you get because of that, are critical for this team. 12 turnovers, going to clean that up, obviously, but yeah, UConn just dominant. Elias, your top past game of the week.
I'll be honest. I mean, maybe not for like the whole scope of college basketball. This game might not have huge implications when it comes to, who goes far in March. But USC Utah, I think, is actually going to be a really good game when it comes to determining somebody's draft stock, because you got a couple of guys in here. You've got, obviously Utah's a team that's sort of on the fringe. Probably, could we call Utah a bubble team? Is Utah a bubble team, or do we think they're pretty firmly?
Where are they currently?
42 in KenPom.
I mean, yeah. They're not a clear-cut bubble team, no.
All right. Well, Utah was the pretty heavy favorite over a USC team that's really fallen off the pace recently. And then you had a lot of guys step up. Bronny James, in just 20 minutes, had 158 offensive rating.
Wow.
That is tough to do. That would probably be the league lead, as if it was an average. Of course, it wasn't, and he only had 7 points. But, yeah, really good game for Bronny James. Isaiah Collier looks to be getting back to it after a slow goings there for a little bit. He had 15, 6 of 12 from the field, 0 of 3 from 3. But yeah, a good game, a good win for USC. And USC is not doing anything in the tournament, but nice for those guys to get a good win over a pretty decent Utah team.
I think another one I'll bring up too for top games of the past week, we have it written down here. Kentucky at Auburn, number 17 versus number 14 in Kentucky. Obviously it was a pretty weird game, I would say, but at the same time, I think Kentucky kind of handled their business on the road. Obviously, Auburn's proven themselves to be a really tough team this year. Kentucky as well up there. Kentucky 18-7, Auburn 20-6 with that loss. But if you look at the stat sheet, it's kind of very similar in terms of what both teams did. I mean, Kentucky 24-54 from the field, Auburn 17-55. Hit 4 threes, both of them, similar at the free throw line, similar rebounding, everything like that. It's just one of those games where Kentucky just kind of had more intensity and energy and got it done.
Yeah, that's a really good win for them on the road, especially, and I can't believe I'm saying this, how much they've struggled at home at Rupp Arena. I believe they've had, it was 3 in a row that they've now lost at Rupp Arena. I mean, that's absolutely insane for a Kentucky team that has so much potential. There's a lot of talent on this team. I'm still very concerned at just how young and inexperienced they are as a collective unit. They've got a lot of really good pieces, of course. But I mean, I don't know. I'll be really curious to see if this team can actually make a run in the tournament.
I think a couple more games I'll throw in before we move on to our next segment. Big Ten basketball being Big Ten basketball, just kind of what it is. Iowa upsets number 20 Wisconsin. Obviously, Hayden, you have more on them a little bit later in the show. But Iowa gets their first quad one win on a drive from Tony Perkins for the game-winning layup. Just a game where Wisconsin was dominating. And as we've seen with teams, not just in the Big Ten Conference, but in every single conference this season, you kind of get up big on the road, and then all of a sudden you look up in the second half and Iowa's up by 11, 12 points. And it's like, where did this just come from? So a good win for Iowa. Definitely a wild conference that the Big Ten is, certainly. Just a lot of wild cards this year. And then Ohio State, the dumpster fire that the Buckeyes program is right now after they fired their head coach, pull off the upset at home and win by 4 points against number 2 Purdue. I mean, come on, Boilermakers.
That's incredible.
What are we doing? A great game for the Buckeyes. 7 threes in that game, 48% from the field. They only missed 1 free throw that game. Purdue still dominated on the boards, 37-24, but 14 turnovers for the Boilermakers. Ohio State only had 6. So again, a couple games where lower tier Big Ten teams got some upsets.
Can I just say how incredible of a showing that was from the free throw line?
Yeah.
I mean, Purdue went 20 of 20, and then like you just said, Ohio State went 10 of 11. You hardly ever see just 1 free throw missed. I mean, of course, coming from Indiana, we see quite a few more misses from the line. But yeah, I mean, that's an incredible win for an Ohio State team that obviously has been struggling as of recent. I mean, I'll talk about them a little bit more here recently.
Well, speaking of talking about them recently, we move on to Flop of the Week. And both of my lovely analysts here, Hayden and Elias, have players or teams that just kind of have fallen flat the past week, have fallen flat this season. Elias, I'm going to go to you first. Who's your Flop of the Week?
Well, don't get me wrong. I would love to say that it's Purdue, but they're only a flop if they didn't meet expectations, and I fully expected them to lose that game because they're not very good.
Expected them to lose that game.
I expect them to lose.
They
every
don't have
game.
their head coach.
I expect Purdue to lose every game that they play when the free throws are fairly even, which is crazy because they had nearly double Ohio State's free. But anyways, I digress.
Here we go.
It's really sad, but I'm going to have to say Indiana State's my flop of the week, only because I've built them up so much the last few weeks. Their metrics offensively are just too good to not talk about. Up until this last week, they were the only school in the country that was top 10 in 3-point percentage, 2-point percentage, and free throw percentage, led the country in effective field goal percentage, had 3 players in the top 100 in true shooting percentage out of a 1,300 player pool. And they couldn't get it done at home against Illinois State.
Yeah.
I think they went something like 3 of 26 from 3, 3 of 29, something like that. Jeez. Lost by 13 to Illinois State and followed it up with a road loss to Southern Illinois. The first time that they've been ranked since Larry Bird played in Terre Haute, and they lose both subsequent games.
They got to be careful here because they lose a couple more games. And I mean, it really just comes down to the conference. I mean, it is going to come down to the conference tournament at this point.
I think at this point, only one team is going to get out of the Missouri Valley Conference.
Probably.
And I think it'll be the conference tournament winner, which is really disappointing because there are 2 quality teams in there with Indiana State and Drake.
Yeah, and it kind of comes down to it sometimes when the shots aren't falling, when you're not hitting, it's just not your night. You're taking some good looks and they're just not falling for you. Hayden, your flop of the week.
I mean, this is a Wisconsin team that was just recently ranked at the top 10.
Right.
And they have just completely fallen off. Their downfall has to be studied by scientists around the nation because it's absolutely ridiculous. They have lost 5 of now their last 6 games. 4 of those, granted, they were on the road, and Big Ten teams just have struggled mightily on the road. But still, some of those losses, I can get around the overtime Nebraska loss. I think Nebraska is one of the most entertaining teams to watch in the Big Ten in my eyes. But then you also have a road loss to Michigan. That just cannot happen. A road loss to Rutgers where they only scored 56 points and allowed Rutgers, a team that does not score in quite big bunches. They scored 78 points against Wisconsin. They've just absolutely disappeared since entering the top 10. And I mean, again, you got to tip your hat to Iowa. They had an incredible comeback on Saturday. But yeah, I mean, they've completely fell off, and they've still got a long way to go.
Yeah, and speaking of a team that's got a long way to go, I'll throw in real quickly for my flop, Indiana. And obviously, this is
Can you call that a flop?
Not really, not particularly, but I think just the loss to Northwestern at home. I mean, come on, especially the fan base and the crowd right now. Like, As Galen Clavio said in our class, the warning sirens are sounding in Bloomington right now. This program's got a long way to go, and it's going to be interesting to see what Mike Woodson does in the offseason with these last few games as well. We move on to the fab of the week. Elias, you wanted to make a point. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, you mentioned it's going to be interesting to see what Mike Woodson does. I think it could arguably be more interesting to see what Indiana does with Mike Woodson.
We move on to our fab of the week. That's
we could talk about for the quite some time.
We could talk about that for a long time. Fab of the week. So this is opposite of flop of the week. This time we're talking about players or teams that really impressed you guys this week, that really outshined the competition and really soared above and beyond their station as a player or team. Hayden, you first. Your fab of the week.
See, I could go the team as a whole, but I won't. I'm going to go with the Ohio State coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
This is a coaching staff that recently fired their head coach and Chris Holtmann, and then had 4 days to refocus the team and prepare for the second-ranked Boilermakers, and they passed with flying colors.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's such a great win for them. Obviously, it's not really going to do a whole lot for them going down the stretch. How are they going to continue to be able to play as a collective unit without really a experienced head coach at the helm? They obviously have their interim head coach at the current moment, but I mean, that was easily the best game that they've played all season long, and to be able to knock off the second-ranked Boilermakers at home and then have that court rush, I mean, that's going to do wonders for their confidence moving forward. There's no question about it.
Absolutely. Elias, fab of the week.
I mean, I'm going to give it to Donovan Clingan. I'd love to say the whole UConn team, but that drum has been beat to death the last, 5-6 days. But Donovan Clingan really establishing himself as somebody who deserves, a look early in the first round of the NBA draft, coming up later this year. I really liked what I saw out of him against Marquette, obviously coming up against another quality big in Oso Ighodaro. He had a double-double in just 24 minutes played. He had 17 points on a really efficient night, shooting 7 of 8, 3 of 4 from the line, 5 offensive, 5 defensive rebounds. Shared the ball a little bit with 2 assists. He's one of those guys who, even though, he doesn't fit the big NBA archetype, he's really taken the last, 10, 15 games to show that he can. Well, not 10, 15 games because he sat for quite a while. But his last 10, 15 games, he's shown that he's somebody who deserves a look at.
And definitely a player that we're going to be looking at come postseason tournament time, conference tournament, into the NCAA tournament. I mentioned in the open that we have a very special guest coming on to the show with us. It's Keegan Nicholson from Cincinnati. He's a writer for the Bearcat Journal and also an IU alum, coming in to talk some Big 12 and Cincinnati men's basketball. Keegan, thanks for coming on the show, my man.
How are we doing, boys? Can I just point out that Elias has a preposterous fit on right now?
Preposterous fit. Define preposterous.
What about it is preposterous to you, Keegan?
It's his usual thing, just head to toe, just trying to make a statement every day with his outfit.
I don't get it. I mean, it's an Indianapolis All-Star T-shirt, and it's a Pacers hat.
You look like you're in a Fanatics commercial. Like, what's going on?
You look like you're in a Charmin commercial.
Well, no, it never does. We can stay there all day. But Keegan, again, thanks for coming on the show and talking with us, my man. Talk some Cincinnati ball, talk some Big 12 ball. But real quickly, want to check in with you. Obviously, Indiana alum, you graduated last year. What's it been like covering Cincinnati sports, your first job out of college, going back and covering these teams like this?
It's been really interesting. I think I came to this beat knowing a lot about the city and about the school because I grew up watching it my entire life. But I approached it with like the mentality that I was still covering Indiana, even though it's like a completely different world media-wise. I would say so much less competition. It's not cutthroat. It's a healthy environment, which a lot of Indiana students are going to find out exists after they graduate and get real jobs. But it's been amazing. I can't thank Indiana, Galen, Mike Wells, Zach Kiefer, all my professors enough for prepping me for what I'm doing now. And, it's been an experience to cover my hometown team and just to be able to do it for one of the best websites that does it.
Keegan, talking about the Bearcats as a whole, they're just coming off a win against UCF 76-74 on the road that actually ended a 2-game home losing streak. Really looking at that game as a whole, really what aspects of that really allowed the Bearcats to win?
I think it was making the necessary shots down the stretch and also making free throws. This team, they grab offensive rebounds with the best of them. They play with great effort and intensity, and they defend the crap out of you at the end of the day. And that's what Wes Miller prides himself on doing. So they've been able to stay in games with rebounding and with defense. And then, the games like Texas and Oklahoma and Baylor, it's making that last shot and the 1 or 2 possession chances that you have in order to pull ahead. And they've been getting that from Simas Lukosius lately, a Butler transfer. He's had a lot of pressure on him with CJ Frederick missing about a month and a half. Dan Skellings at the 3 is having a really good season, pulling down a lot of offensive rebounds, shooting pretty well from 3. No one on the team is shooting good from 3. It's kind of back to the Mick Cronin days of rock fights and just trying to get whatever they'll give you. But it was just about not riding the roller coaster, getting out to a big opening lead. 17-6 lead on the road in the Big 12 is huge. That's how they lost against Iowa State. It's how they lost against Houston. And it's how they went to Lubbock and beat Texas Tech. So they did everything that they were supposed to do. And then they created a big enough cushion to be able to bring home the win.
Hey, Keegan Elias here, known quality dresser here around Bloomington. You've got your finger on the pulse of this Cincinnati team. What's the vibe in that program with just 6 games left on the schedule?
It's tense. I would say the UCF game was the start of a 7-game schedule, a 7-game season. I mean, and coming off back-to-back games at home, back-to-back losses against the number 1 and the number 3 defenses, according to KenPom, in the country. It was just really, really ugly. Houston was a close game. They had their chances to win, but like I said before, the Cougars just got out to an early lead and built a big enough cushion to kind of withstand multiple Cincinnati runs. And then Iowa State, they just got dominated. I mean, it was the worst game since they lost to Dayton on the neutral court, since they blew the lead against West Virginia. And it was time for some soul searching, but they didn't get much of a break going on the road to a top 20 defense in UCF. Luckily, UCF is horrendous offensively, and they gave Cincinnati a little bit of a break. But they went on the road and they got a tough win, a win where they were underdogs, according to Vegas, 1.5-point underdogs. So now you go forward, you got Oklahoma State, you got to go to TCU, you got to go to Oklahoma, you host West Virginia, and you host Kansas State. I think you have to go to Houston too. And it's basically, you have to go 5-2 in those 7 games to feel comfortable. So they're 1-0 right now. You have to steal a road game against Oklahoma or TCU to be able to feel comfortable and get off the bubble, possibly get into the NCAA tournament.
Keegan, this is a team that's suffered a couple really close ranked losses. Obviously, 4-point loss to OU. You mentioned the 5-point loss to Houston. With these 6 games left, how do they turn some of those ranked losses into wins as they move into, hopefully, the postseason, into the tournament, and then maybe punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament?
It's a boring answer, but it's shoot at an average rate, according to college basketball. When you look at how poorly this team has shot, not just from the field or from 3, but layups. I mean, they've missed layups, and they've probably missed about the most layups in college basketball, I'd say, or it's up there with how poorly they've shot. If the fact that they've put this record together, and the fact that they still have a chance, the fact that they went on the road and beat Texas Tech and BYU with the rebounding and with the defense, with how poorly they've shot, is crazy. So I think you have to continue to get consistently good guard play from Jizzle James and from Day Thomas. They haven't been blowing the stat sheet up at all, but they're not turning the ball over that much. They did against Iowa State, but they went on a long stretch where neither had more than 3 turnovers in the game. And then you make the necessary shots. You don't have to shoot 45 to 50% from 3 in games. If you can make more than 70% of your free throws night in and night out, And if you can just make, I don't know, shoot 35% or better from three, I think you're going to be in a good spot. And then continue to defend and pull down offensive rebounds, get it out quick on offense, which is what they want to do, control the pace of the game. And I think they're going to be in a good spot. Oklahoma's trending downward. TCU's kind of been struggling. Kansas State's struggling. So they played multiple really tough stretches this year. I think this is the easier stretch they have, and that's not saying much in the Big 12 because UCF can beat Kansas, West Virginia can beat Kansas, anything can happen. So it's a really, really interesting conference.
Keegan, you made a boring answer, not really that boring, and I also will throw out there that we've learned that efficient basketball is not necessarily entertaining basketball. I know you remember that. Yeah. Talk. But hey, go ahead.
Yeah, so Keegan, I mean, this Cincinnati team, it really just doesn't look like there's been one player that really has outshined anybody else. It looks like it's kind of been a collective unit so far this season. But looking at your perspective, who has really impressed you throughout the course of the season?
Dan Skillings. I think that's really the only answer. He came in as a freshman and he started playing basketball his junior year of high school. So that was his first year of playing organized basketball. Before that, he would just play pickup. But coaches around the Philadelphia area would like hear about this kid. He's like 6'6". He's has more length than anyone and he can shoot it. So he's extremely raw and he's still learning how to play the game. But Wes Miller always says the best thing about freshmen is they turn into sophomores. And you're starting to see that progression that he's made, that natural progression. I don't know how anyone would describe his game. I just say he plays with his hair on fire. He loves driving the baseline. He can shoot it pretty well. He's had his struggles, but he's had some really big games. He gets to the rim pretty well. He makes some ridiculous shots, bending his body to get to the hoop, to get around defenders. And then once he looks elite and like one of the best players in the Big 12, the next possession, he'll come down and slip and then try to do a behind the back pass in the same motion. And you're just like, what you just looked really good. Like what happened? But that's the Dan Skillings experience. What separated him to the point where I can say he's a super good basketball player and not just a hot and cold guy is his ability to get offensive rebounds. At his height, he's not someone who you'd expect to compete with the big man down low, but he can jump out of the gym. He has great reach and great length, and he plays, like I said, with his hair on fire. So he's willing to make contact with people to get down and dirty, and he really, really helps Cincinnati on the boards on both sides of the ball.
Keegan, 6 teams in the Big 12 ranked in the top 25. Who wins this conference tournament?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's a really, really good question.
I didn't write.
I'm going to go. Now it's a horrible question. I figured one of your producers wrote it. I'm gonna go with Iowa State. And it's really a toss-up between them and Houston. I don't think Kansas is deep enough to have much of an impact in the NCAA tournament this year. They obviously have talent out the wazoo, but they just don't have depth. It's actually funny, and I'll get back to what you asked before. But after UC lost to Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse, Bill Self said, they had Dan Skillings come off the bench and get 20 points. And then he goes, we don't have the luxury of a Dan Skillings. And I was like, Bill Self saying that he doesn't have the luxury of something. Okay. I thought that was really funny.
Dollar Bill Self couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. With the NIL war chest, they don't have the luxury of paying players. But Houston and Iowa State are very comparable teams. I just think Tamin Lipsey and Keyshawn, it's Gilbert. It's not Gibson. It's Gilbert. Keyshawn Gilbert, they have really, really good guard play. And how they play defensively, they just suffocate you. And I really do think Iowa State has a chance to make a big difference in the NCAA tournament and go on a little bit of a run. TJ Otzelberger, I don't know if he's going to be at Iowa State for 3 more years because I think a really big school is going to pay him a lot of money to come coach for them. This is his 3rd year at Iowa State. He's going to lead them to the 3rd straight NCAA tournament appearance. What he's been able to do with his rosters has been really, really impressive because you don't hear about 5-star recruits going to Iowa State ever, basically. So I really, really like that team. But it's like I'm 55% Iowa State, 45% Houston, just because of how talented and how evergreen Kelvin Sampson's Cougars teams have been through the past 5 to 6 years.
Keegan, to follow up on that really quickly, I mean, then that has to mean, especially for the regular season title, tonight's game against Iowa State and Houston has to be massive.
Yes, if you want to watch extremely ugly games with turnovers and steals, but like two really talented teams in the same breath, watch that game. It's going to be a really, really good game. Iowa State was more impressive to me with what they did to Cincinnati. It could be – it's interesting, and Wes talked about this. Playing teams twice in the Big 12, it gives you an opportunity to kind of prepare. That had been the first time they'd seen Iowa State's defense. And it's good, but it's different than Houston's. And it's a Houston defense that Cincinnati had gotten really, really familiar with in the American. So you don't know what it looks like when you play twice. I think Cincinnati will look a little bit better. I don't think they'll win if they play Iowa State again. But they were just so impressive in what they were able to do and just suffocating on defense. Tonight's game, Houston and Iowa State, that's going to be a marquee one. And if you're a college basketball fan, you should watch it.
Keegan, last question for you. Of those 6 teams that Elias referenced, which one of them goes the furthest in the NCAA tournament?
I feel like it's another toss-up between Houston and Iowa State. I'm going to go – I'll say this. If it's not Houston and Iowa State in the Big 12 championship together, whichever team gets knocked out earlier and gets a couple more days rest, they go the furthest. I think how physical this conference is, I think whichever team wins that is kind of going to be at a disadvantage. And it's crazy how to even manage that as a coach, just completely exerting yourself to get a tournament championship, even though you're a bid, like you're going to get in the field. So I'll do the old rest versus rust notion. It's down to Houston and Iowa State. I don't think Kansas is going to make that much of a run. TCU's interesting. I think Emmanuel Miller is super, super good. But I think it just comes down to Kelvin Sampson and TJ Otzelberger at the end of the day. I'm a defense guy. I love basketball because of Mick Cronin. So whichever team has the better defense, I'm gonna give the upper hand to.
You are sleeping on my man Johnny Furphy.
Okay.
I'll tell you what.
I'll sleep on a 6 or 7 man rotation 24/7.
The emergence of Johnny Furphy should be studied in a lab.
Hey, he came out against UC. That was his first game. He scored like 20 against UC, hit a dagger 3. So I saw it up close and personal.
You know who leads the conference in 2-point field goal percentage? Johnny Furphy. Johnny Furphy. Future lottery.
It's not Hunter.
Hey, Keegan, really appreciate the analysis on the show. We're going to keep you on for our last segment, though, my man. It's time for Shot Clock. And you're going to go first. We got a celebrity shot clock.
We're going to throw him into the fire.
Throw him into the fire. So here's how it works. You get 30 seconds to rant about anything you want in the game of men's college basketball this year, right now, or just in general, basketball in general. You get 30 seconds to rant about whatever you want.
We're not going to give this man time to think. We had all day to think about
Riley did tell me that, like, he offered me the shot. I thought it was literally anything. I came with 2. Okay. I can do anything.
You can, yes, you can do anything in basketball. Yeah.
In basketball. Okay. It's related to basketball, but it's really not.
Okay.
Media members, all the student media members, stop wearing Nike socks with dress pants and dress shoes. Stop wearing white socks. I'm looking at you, Mason Williams. If you're watching this, Mason Williams, Jack Edwards, stop wearing white socks. Wear standard dress socks with dress shoes, nice dress pants, a khaki, And
You got
also wear dress shoes. Don't be like Kevin Vera and wear white Air Force Ones.
Hey, he got the
Okay.
shot off at 27
Okay.
seconds. Great job.
Took his shot at most of IU sports media.
We did.
Here I am.
I've learned that lesson too. I've learned that lesson. All right, I'll go ahead and go next, and then I'll toss it to you guys.
All right.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Purdue, for all that is holy on this earth, which is nothing, don't choke in the postseason. Please, please don't choke in the postseason. You have so much talent on this team. You're going to have back-to-back National Player of the Year guy in the post. You got so much to work with. You've got so many weapons. Please make a run. I know I'm saying this as an Indiana guy, but please, I'm going to be so frustrated with you if you do that.
Wow. 29 seconds.
Got it off at 29 seconds. All right, Elias or Hayden? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Hayden?
We got to save Elias for last.
Okay.
I mean,
All right.
you just have to with the amount of shot clock things he's done this year.
You got shot clock on in 3, 2, 1, go.
Let's keep conference tournament sites at a centralized location. I'm looking at the Big Ten in general here. I know it's going to change up a lot next year with 4 West Coasters coming to the Big Ten. But for this season to be in Minneapolis, that is the worst possible location it could be in my mind. I went there last year for the women's basketball tournament. It was awful. Keep it in either Chicago or Indianapolis. Those are the 2 best places for it to happen in the Big Ten.
Dang, got it. 29 seconds. You did it. All right, everybody's been under time, so we're going to see if we can go 4 for 4 in
I'd be
this.
shocked.
All right, Elias, you're on in 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, I'm going to look directly into the camera for this one because I'm speaking to somebody. I'm speaking to Rick Pitino. Where that camera. Rick Pitino. Embarrassment to college basketball with his performance last night in the post-game press conference. Let me ask you guys, if you crash a sports car, is it the car's fault for driving poorly or is it the driver for wrapping it around a tree at 50 miles an hour? There are good players on this basketball team. Dennis Jenkins, Jordan Dingle, Joel Soriano. One last thing before the shot clock. I know it's over. I know it's over. Offensive rebound. Rick Pitino, if you're not going to take any responsibility for your team's failures, you don't get to share in the spoils and the successes when you start to win games.
Man, this man went way.
You went way over. You needed that offensive board. 45 seconds. Well, hey, that's going to do it for the show today. Thank you all so much for being here with us. Big shout out to Keegan for taking his time to come on to the show. We really appreciate it, my man. Best of luck with the rest of the season. Keep being awesome. You're doing a lot of amazing work. You're making IU proud. And yeah, we really appreciate you having coming on the show. We'll be back on Wednesday for the women's show to preview Iowa, Indiana inside Assembly Hall. Thanks for listening, everybody. God bless.